A report that immigrant babies and young children are being held in shelters after being forcibly removed from their parents. According to the Associated Press, they are being held in so-called tender age shelters. The Department of Homeland Security defines tender age as 12 and under. The AP's report says there are at least 3 facilities in South Texas. A 4th is planned for Houston. Garance Burke wrote that story for the Associated Press and joins us now. Garance, thanks so much for being with us. Can you tell us what those who have visited these tender age shelters, what have they seen?
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. We spoke with medical providers as well as lawyers who visited some of these babies and small children who were placed in shelters in South Texas after being forcibly separated from their parents. And what they described was playrooms full of children crying, unable to stop crying, just really in crisis, so distressed altogether en masse in these facilities that originally were equipped for older children, but now have been rehabbed to serve the younger populations arriving.
Right, and I think I read from your report there that, the officials visiting these facilities said there's nothing wrong with the facilities. They're perfectly fine. They're perfectly nice. The issue is the fact that these children were separated from their families. So how old are the children in these tender age facilities? I know we said 12 and under, but what about the 5 and under subset?
We're definitely hearing that there's a 5 and under subset. One of the child advocates who I spoke to told me about an entire cage full of 5-year-olds at one of the CBP processing stations. So presumably those kids have been sent on either to one of these tender age facilities or perhaps into the foster care system. And this morning we actually learned that the foster care system, which is an alternative placement for very small children, has seen kids as young as 8 months old coming to them after being separated from their families at the border.
And so who is watching these young children in these shelters? I mean, as any parent can tell you, a child, a toddler, they need constant supervision. Is there enough personnel watching these children?
You know, it's very unclear. There are certain licensing requirements for there to be more adults in the room, say, for toddlers than are needed for the typical population of unaccompanied children, which is, teens coming here alone. But I think that HHS is going to have to face a lot of inquiries about the level of staffing and the training of staffing in these tender age facilities. They're run not directly by HHS, but by contractors. So there are also some questions to be asked there of those private and nonprofit enterprises.
And so do we know what will now happen to these children, especially in light of the president now saying that he will reverse course on this policy?
Again, I think there are a lot of questions to be asked there. If you have as many as 2,300 children who have been separated from their families under the zero tolerance policy who are now in this pipeline, it remains very unclear as to how exactly they'll be reunited with their parents, given that some of their parents already have been deported.
So, we understand that the government had plans to open a new shelter soon. We don't know whether that may change in light of what the president said just moments ago. But what did you know about those plans?
Well, there was a plan to open a tender age care shelter in Houston that we wrote about. I don't know about any additional shelters that have been announced today. Those specifics are not have not been revealed as yet. But as best we know, there are at least 4 shelters that have been slated to receive kids, babies, small children, and more coming in the future.
Now, what do doctors and psychologists say about the impact, the psychological impact of housing young children in shelters like these and separating them from their families, especially at those tender ages of 5 and under, 10 and under?
Right. Well, I think one of the reasons why this is so surprising is because the nation's child welfare system has really moved away from having young children in institutional settings. We don't do orphanages here any longer. And that's because psychologists and pediatricians say the lasting trauma on children of being taken from their parents and then placed in an institution with no contact with those who they most loved and trusted has really lasting implications for their development, their brain. I think it's really a serious matter here.
Garance Burke, thank you so much for your reporting on that.